Moving to a story that we at WION have been tracking for the past few days. Now, in a bid to quell trucker-led protests against COVID health rules, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has invoked rarely used emergency powers. This after Canadian police arrested 11 people with a cache of firearms at US border. The protesters were blocking a border crossing with the United States. It is only the second time in Canadian history that such powers have been invoked in peacetime. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that the Emergencies Act has been invoked to supplement provincial and territorial capacity, now to address the blockades and occupations. Trudeau ruled out using the military and said that the emergency measures will be limited and geographically targeted, but that authorities would be granted more powers to arrest protesters and seize their trucks in order to clear blockades. Funding for the protest will also be banned. Listen in.
After discussing with Cabinet and caucus, after consultation with premiers from all provinces and territories, after speaking with opposition leaders, the federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations. I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time-limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address.
Now, the Canadian Parliament would have to approve the use of the emergency measures within 7 days. It also has the power to revoke them. In addition to providing police resources, Canada will broaden the scope of its anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules to cover crowdfunding platforms. Now, all crowdfunding programs and payment providers need to register with Canada's anti-money laundering agency. The mandate came in immediate effect. The government will also allow banks to temporarily freeze the accounts of those suspected of supporting the blockades without obtaining a court order. In addition, the insurance of trucks involved in the blockades will be suspended as well. Canadian authorities have said about half of the funding for the protest has come from US supporters. The threat of violence lingered near the border with US, at the border between Canada's Alberta and American state Montana. Canadian police arrested 11 protesters with rifles, handguns, body armor and ammunition. This is just a day after another key US-Canada border crossing was cleared in Ontario. Truckers and other protesters heard about the emergency powers but remained at the protest site. Hundreds of trucks are still clogging the streets of the capital, Ottawa. For the past 2 weeks, hundreds of protesters and trucks have been rallying against vaccine mandates. Ontario has been the epicenter of protests. Demonstrators have been calling for the lifting of the health measures. The Premier of Ontario has now announced to lift vaccine passport requirements in the Canadian province. Now, the ease in curbs follows higher vaccination numbers and also the peak of cases sparked by the Omicron variant. The easing of Ontario health measures will start on February 17th. All capacity limits will be removed except for sporting events, concert venues and theatres. These will be capped at 50%, while some higher risk setting will also be capped at 25%. The vaccine passport itself will be removed by March 1st.